It's all true. In Formula One, Ferrari has not delivered the expected results at all, but precisely for this reason, we must thoroughly and rationally analyze the situation that unfolded early this morning at the 5.278-kilometer Albert Park Grand Prix circuit in Melbourne, in the qualifying session for the Australian Grand Prix. It is therefore almost an obligation to make several considerations about the facts, separating the good from the less good. We can say that, overall, the SF-25 single-seater had found very good handling between Friday and Saturday. However, in qualifying, the Maranello team took a step back, failing to capitalize on the car's pace. As we highlighted during preseason testing session in Bahrain, the performance levels of the four top teams are extremely close. Everything comes down to small details, which are not always in plain sight. The SF-25 had a tendency to understeer indeed, but with patience, the team had largely managed to contain this behavior so that it did not cause issues on corner exit, turning into oversteer. Already in the final free practice session, however, the car showed signs of an imperfect balance. The first chicane was Ferrari territory, as it was able to use the inside curb of turn 1 more effectively. On corner exit, the SF-25 utilized the full width of the track very well, unlike McLaren, which stayed more to the inside. The MCL-39 has a stiffer setup, making it less suited to absorbing bumps. The British F1 car could not follow the same racing line as the Ferrari without becoming unsettled. At turn 3, the two cars were evenly matched, but at turn 4, telemetry data shown that the McLaren carried much more speed, indicating a very strong change of direction. Overall, the Maranello team confirmed good aerodynamic balance, as the SF-25 had similar performance to the McLaren in the turn 6-7 chicane. The main issue that emerged during the final practice session for the Australian Grand Prix was the last sector. In this section of the Albert Park circuit, the Ferrari SF-25 cars struggled to be effective, losing the advantage gained earlier. During qualifying, we witnessed a gradual decline, with an unusual Ferrari compared to what we had previously observed. The SF-25 proved unstable at turn 3, where Charles Leclerc lost the rear on entry in both of his Q3 attempts. As we explained yesterday, Ferrari suffers from a certain degree of understeer on entry, but we had never seen such a pronounced lack of rotation at corner entry. It is difficult to determine whether this was due to driving itself, but a small setup change may have unbalanced the car. Charles Leclerc had already reported a different feeling with the car starting from the final free practice session earlier today. The most accredited hypothesis is a thermal issue with the tire compound. While it is difficult to know for sure, the cause seems to be a failure to adapt to the parameter that was modified by Pirelli yesterday. We are referring to the 1 psi increase in front tire pressure, a change imposed by the Italian manufacturer for Saturday in Australia. The matter is certainly not entirely clear yet, but it seems that even when checking the dashboard on the steering wheel, the target temperature was not correct. The difference in the pressure criteria imposed on the tire can create a condition that limits the contact patch of the compound. As a result, grip decreases, and so does performance. In his final attempt, Lewis Hamilton did not make any major mistakes, and overall, car number 44 had a satisfactory balance. However, Lewis Hamilton is still a step behind his Maranello teammate Charles Leclerc in terms of understanding the car. The various Formula One tests carried out over the winter were not enough. The British driver still needs to grasp the effects of the different steering wheel settings and unlock more potential. Lewis Hamilton is in fact still searching for the right feeling with the Ferrari SF-25. Only 8th on the grid for tomorrow's race, the British driver will still start alongside his teammate, who is just 0.2 faster. A positive sign for the 7-time Formula One world champion, even considering that Charles Leclerc aborted his final flying lap. It was not the Saturday that Ferrari fans were expecting, that much is clear. After Friday in Melbourne, expectations were quite different. The SF-25 already seemed to struggle in FP3, where the balance found in the first 2 sessions began to falter. Qualifying then painted a nightmare scenario, the 4th fastest team, even behind Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon. Is this the true potential of the prancing horse? Clearly not. The tire pressure change we have indicated could have been at fault, but other reasons behind this one-lap performance struggle will need to be analyzed after the weekend, awaiting a more complete race assessment. In the meantime, Lewis Hamilton is only partially satisfied. On one hand, he is continuing his adaptation to the SF-25. On the other, there are still areas that need fine-tuning. In an interview at the end of the qualifying session in Melbourne, the 7-time Formula One world champion discussed his adaptation to the car, explaining that it did not feel entirely natural and had been challenging. The British driver admitted it was difficult to go into detail, even regarding small setup changes. Lewis Hamilton also mentioned that there were new tools he was still trying to understand, particularly in terms of their impact on the car. However, he felt satisfied because he believed he had extracted nearly everything from the car, although he thought there were still a couple of tenths left to find. Reflecting on his performance in Australian Grand Prix qualifying, Lewis Hamilton acknowledged that he had not expected to be so far off, but was pleased to be close to Charles Leclerc at the end of his first qualifying session with the new car. He emphasized that he was still in the learning phase, having worked all weekend to refine the setup and explore new tools that had not been tested before. In his view, the Maranello team had done a good job. The British driver described his first lap as quite good, while the second felt messy and less effective. Overall, he noted that the car lacked the necessary pace, and his attempts to push further led to some mistakes. He also pointed out that the rear was unstable, causing some struggles, which he found disappointing. Lewis Hamilton concluded by stating that while the team had expected to be at a disadvantage before arriving in Australia for the first round of the 2025 Formula One Championship, Friday's performance in the free practice sessions had given them hope for more pace. In the end, however, that expectation was not met. Given tomorrow's weather conditions, another immediate hypothesis is that the team sacrificed dry qualifying performance in favor of a setup suited for a wet race. A typical wet weather setup includes higher aerodynamic load, softer mechanical settings, and increased ride height. However, unfortunately for Ferrari fans, this does not seem to be the most likely explanation. Firstly, modern F1 cars have such advanced aerodynamics that, even in wet conditions, teams make only minor adjustments rather than drastically altering setups as they did in the past to keep the car within the optimal performance window. Moreover, Charles Leclerc's comments, despite being measured, did not suggest confidence or an aggressive outlook for the race. Instead, he implied that even tomorrow would be about damage limitation. The Monegasque acknowledged that finishing 7th and 8th was a disappointing result, admitting that even in the worst-case scenario, he had not expected such an outcome. He reiterated that this was just the starting point of the season and emphasized the need for consistent work rather than hoping for miracles in the race. Instead, he stressed the importance of scoring points and gradually making progress toward the front of the grid. Leclerc expressed confidence in the car's potential, but pointed out that it had been outside the optimal operating window, which had been evident in its performance. He noted that the car had changed significantly between Q2 and Q3, and in the final session, he had struggled to find the right feeling. Unsatisfied with the result, he described the car as particularly difficult to drive in qualifying. Looking ahead to the race, Charles stated that he would give his best effort while avoiding unnecessary risks, acknowledging that there were still many uncertainties about the upcoming session.